Test, test, test. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the weekly blog, podcast on how to build a t-shirt company, how to build a clothing company. So one of the first things I want to talk about today is, made in Canada and why Canadian made is so important. So, did you know, prior to 1989, over 70% of all clothing bought and sold in Canada was made in Canada. 70%. That number, as of today, right, the most recent stats, according to Stats Canada, that number is less than 5%. Less than 5%. So before 1989, over 70% of all clothing bought and sold was made in Canada. As of 2020, that number is less than 5%. Less than 5% of all clothing bought and sold here in Canada is made in Canada. So I want to start with some historical context, right? In the 1970s and 80s, Canadian manufacturing was thriving. We had a robust textile industry, providing jobs, supporting local economies. It wasn't just about clothes, it was about community. It was about quality, national pride, making things here. We used to make things here. And more than just clothes, we used to actually take pride in producing here in Canada. Made in Canada stood for quality. It stood for something that would last a long time. Remember, you used to have your dad's sweatshirt, right? It could have been a Roots sweatshirt. It could have been a Lee's sweatshirt, whatever. But it was made in Canada. That thing would last for ages. Your dad would hand it down to you. It was a generational heirloom. Now, you're lucky if a hoodie or a sweater or even a t-shirt lasts a full year. And that's something we're trying to change. Now, the reasons clothing stopped being made in Canada was due to a little thing called globalization, right? Globalization changed the name of the game, especially when it came to Canadian-made clothing. Now, the North American Free Trade Agreement, otherwise known as NAFTA, played a significant role. While it opened up new markets, it also meant that cheaper labor abroad started to undercut local manufacturing. So prior to NAFTA, right, when all clothing was made in Canada, that was due to high tariffs, high import costs to bring clothing from outside. But as soon as NAFTA came about in around 1989, that's when cheap labor flooded the market. Clothing produced by cheap labor flooded the market. So in the 80s, about 70% of clothing bought and sold here in Canada was made here. Today, that's less than 5%. So let's talk about why that changed and why it actually matters, right? Globalization brought many benefits, but it also led to things such as outsourcing. Companies found ways that they could produce goods, mainly clothing, at a fraction of the cost by moving operations overseas. This shift wasn't just about lower costs, it was about survival in a fiercely competitive market. Because here's the thing, when you produce clothing, the material of the clothing is actually one of the cheapest parts. The most expensive part about producing clothing is the fact that it has to be done by labor. And Canadian labor is 10 times more expensive than labor produced overseas. Now that's important because when it comes to making clothing, thanks to NAFTA, if you can get a shirt made overseas and import it for next to nothing, it becomes a lot cheaper. You ultimately get a cheaper shirt. Now, what does a cheaper shirt mean? It means a lower quality, it means less investment in the community, and it means less jobs here in Canada. And that's why we're trying to help revive the Canadian textile industry. We really believe that there is value in producing things here in Canada, particularly clothing, the jobs it does, the jobs it creates for a diverse Canadian economy, the quality of the garment, what you end up getting as a consumer. So here's the thing with globalization. While costs went down, so did the quality and quality control of the production process. We've all experienced it, the difference between a well-made durable piece of clothing and something that falls apart after a few washes. Because here's the thing, when you're looking to produce something and you have a fiercely competitive market because you're competing with not only just the manufacturers in your country, but now every single manufacturer around the world, you're looking for every which way to cut corners. Maybe save a little bit of fabric here, maybe make it a little bit smaller here, skip out on a couple of stitches there. It's a race to the bottom to make a garment for cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And only person that ends up losing is the end consumer, because while you might have a cheaper shirt today, maybe you go down to the mall, you get a shirt for $10. How long is that t-shirt going to last you? That might last only 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 washes. And then in another year's time, you have to buy it again. So you have to look at what is the overall life value, the overall cost per use of the lifetime value of that garment compared to one that you buy overseas that you get for cheap versus one that is made here locally and that's well made. Our manufacturers aren't looking to cut corners. They're not. They are looking to produce a high quality garment. So our Canadian made clothing, it might be a little bit more expensive up front, but that means it's going to last you years after year after year, and you're going to be able to hand it down to your kids just like they used to. And what that means is the cost per wear, the cost that it costs you every time you wear that garment is going to be far, far less than the cost per wear when you buy clothing that is manufactured overseas. It's going to be manufactured at a lower quality, right? Globalization brought cheaper goods here to Canada, but at what cost? Quality, local jobs, and our economy paid the price. I want to say that again. Globalization, when it came to clothing, brought cheaper goods, but at what cost? Globalization brought cheaper clothing here in Canada, but at what cost? It costs quality, it costs local jobs, and our economy ultimately paid the price. Now, another factor in a lot of manufacturing overseas is the rise of fast fashion. We've seen it from brands like Zara, H&M, Shein, Temu. They've revolutionized the industry with quick turnaround times and trendy, affordable clothes. But this also came at the expense of traditional manufacturing hubs like Canada. Canada used to be a manufacturing hub. We used to produce things like denim. We used to be producing hats, t-shirts, sweaters, you name it. We used to be a manufacturing textile hub in Canada. Prior to 1989, over 70% of all clothing bought and sold here in Canada was made in Canada. As of 2020, that number is less than 5%. Less than 5% of all clothing bought and sold here in Canada is actually made here in Canada. And fast fashion has a role to play in that. Fast fashion thrives on mass production, low cost, and rapid consumption. It's a model that prioritizes quantity over quality and speed over sustainability. As consumers, we got hooked on the idea of getting more for less, often overlooking the broader implications, right? It's as simple as that. You know, we sacrifice speed for sustainability. What actually is more sustainable? A garment that lasts longer, that stays in your closet longer and out of the landfill, or something that disintegrates after a couple of washes and ends up in the landfill sooner and in greater numbers, in bigger quantities, right? Nobody wants to fix their clothes anymore. Everyone just wants to get a brand new piece. Back when clothing was made here in Canada, when quality mattered, you could repair stuff. It was worth the time, effort, and money to repair stuff, keep it out of the landfill, make it more sustainable. So fast fashion gave us more clothes for less money, but it also accelerated the decline of local manufacturing. It's a quality versus quantity game. What's more important to you? The quality of a Canadian-made garment that's going to last you a long time, a piece of clothing that's going to stick in your closet, classic, timeless, hard-working, good-looking piece of clothing, or something that's going to disintegrate in the wash after a few loads of laundry, right? It's quality over quantity. So fast fashion is just to blame for the decline in Canadian-made clothing. Fast fashion trends, overconsumption. We all got clothing en masse for cheap, but at what cost? We really have to take a step back and really figure out what is the cost of these cheap clothes, right? The fourth part I want to talk about is the environmental and economic costs. Let's not forget, right? The environmental and economic costs of lower Canadian-made clothing. Outsourcing manufacturing means often lax environmental regulations, leading to higher pollution levels. Moreover, it's a result in job losses at home, weakening local economies, and contributing to the decline of skilled labor. When we buy cheap, fast fashion, we don't see the hidden cost, the environmental impact, the poor working conditions overseas, and the erosions of local industries are all part of the price we pay. So, the reason Canadian manufacturing is so expensive, the reason that it costs so much to produce a t-shirt, a hat, a sweater, you name it, here in Canada, again, it goes back to the labor. The materials cost just about the same no matter where you are in the country. The most expensive part about producing clothing here in Canada is the cost of labor. To pay Canadian living wages, to pay someone that is in a safe working environment, that has a secure standard of living. Because those are the true hidden costs of low quality, cheap clothing. We don't know the conditions that the clothing is being manufactured in. We don't know how the employees are being treated. We don't know if it's safe for them. And we don't know the environmental impact. Canada has such strict environmental and labor regulations when it comes to things like manufacturing. That's why when you support Canadian manufacturing, you're supporting manufacturing that's done in a safe and secure and environmentally friendly manner, right? When you support manufacturing that's done overseas, we don't get to see how it's made. We don't get to see what is done, what the manufacturers are doing with the waste. Maybe they're doing something good with the waste. Maybe they're not, right? Clothing is the second highest polluting industry in the world. It's the second highest because of the dyes that's used in our clothing and the enormous amounts of water that it takes to produce raw materials like cotton and other materials and elements that go into the manufacturing process. So would you rather, we all need clothes, we all know that it takes a huge amount of resources and environmental impact to produce our clothes. Would you rather them being made in a country like Canada that has strict labor and environmental laws where we know how the workers are being treated? They are safe and secure with such laws as minimum wage requirements, WCB, things like that, or in a country where you aren't so sure of how the workers are being treated, or the waste and how the environmental impact of how the clothing is being made. So every time we buy cheap, fast fashion, we indirectly contribute to environmental degradation and job loss in our own community. We really have to rethink how we want to support our local communities. Do we want to support local jobs, a diverse Canadian economy, quality goods that are meant to last, family-run businesses? The manufacturers that we use to produce our clothing are second, third generation family-run businesses that treat their employees, treat their team members like family, that they've been working for them, working with them for 20, 30 years plus. That means something, right? That money is staying here in Canada. So what do we do about it? One of the most important and impactful actions we can take is to support local businesses. Buying Canadian-made products not only ensures higher quality, but also helps sustain local jobs and economies. Local manufacturers often adhere to stricter environmental standards and offer better working conditions. By supporting them, we contribute to a more sustainable and ethical fashion industry, right? So supporting local, supporting Canadian made, it isn't just about patriotism, it's about sustainability, it's about quality and ethical consumption. Let's bring manufacturing back to Canada. Our goal is to take that Stats Canada, right? Prior to 1989, over 70% of all clothing bought and sold here in Canada was made here in Canada. That number as of 2020 is less than 5%. Our goal is to help reverse that. We want to increase the percentage of clothing bought and sold in this country that's made here in Canada, because you get a better quality garment, you get a garment that's a piece of clothing that's going to last, that's made much more sustainably from an environmental impact, and is produced in a manner that is safe and respectable for the workers that are actually producing your clothing. But innovation is a crucial role in revitalizing local manufacturing. Advancements in technology such as automation and sustainable production methods can make local manufacturing a lot more competitive. It's about finding that balance between cost, equality, and sustainability. And I get it, Canadian-made clothing is super expensive. I don't expect everyone to drop everything that they're doing right now and go out and buy as much Canadian-made clothing as they can. I don't. I get it. It's expensive. We all can't afford it. Times are tough. But what I'm asking is to really take a hard look at your shopping habits and how can you support local manufacturing or Canadian-made manufacturing where you can. If everyone were just to buy one piece of Canadian-made clothing, one piece, if everyone just had one piece in their closet that was made in Canada, think of the absolute enormous impact that would have on our environment, the local economy, but also the longevity of your closet. Gone will be the days where your clothing just disintegrates in the wash. Gone will be the days where things start to fade and not look good after a couple months of owning. Think of the impact we can have on the environment, the economy, the textile industry as a whole, other manufacturing industries here in Canada, if everyone just supported Canadian-made local manufacturing where they could and when they could. It's an absolutely huge deal. Innovation is absolutely key to revitalizing local manufacturing. With technology and sustainability, we can make Canadian-made competitive again, right? It's up to us to make it competitive. We have to support these second, third generation family-run businesses. If we support them, they'll utilize technology to become more competitive and ultimately reduce the price. The more that Canadians support Canadian made, the more that there's a demand for it, the more manufacturers that will pop up, the more clothing that will be made here in Canada, which will be ultimately reducing the cost to produce it here, just thanks to economies of scale and technology. It'll be more sustainable and an even better, longer lasting quality garment. So to wrap things up, I want to leave you with a call to action. Next time you're shopping for clothes, think about where they're made. Read your labels. That's all I ask, is read your labels. What is the environmental, economic, and sustainability impact of something that says made overseas versus made in Canada? That's all I ask, is for you to read your labels. Really understand where your clothing is coming from and who you're supporting with your wallet and your dollars. Next time you're shopping, ask yourself, where is this made? Does it support local? So I urge you to support local, choose quality, and let's rebuild our manufacturing sector together. If anyone ever has any questions, always feel free to reach out. Thank you so much. Hopefully this wasn't too ranty, and we'll see you next time.